Alright, what's going on, guys? So a couple of you have commented in the videos of building the Cheeto as far as running the main engine wiring harness. I will say this video is going to be a little bit out of continuity because I usually post Cheeto build videos on Sunday. So yesterday we did a Cheeto build video. That video hasn't gone live yet, so the continuity is going to be a little bit off. So disregard some other things that are done to the car that haven't been on the channel yet. Mainly skip over that and just talk about running wiring harnesses. Some tips and tricks to figure out where everything goes and sort of how to throw it all together. Now, the main thing that you can do to make your life easier when pulling off and reinstalling the engine harness is to mark everything where they went before you pull it all apart using zip ties. You know, put one zip tie on one, 2 zip ties on another connector, 3 zip ties on another, so on and so forth, you know, just to sort of jog the memory of where everything goes so you can sort of match it all up. But if it's too late for that, you know, there's a lot of other ways you can go about it. Now, the main thing with these main engine harnesses is they are kind of set up to be where they're going to sit. Now, the thing that I can tell you that is the most helpful for setting up these engine harnesses is getting the thing tied to the engine block. So the first thing you do when you lay it down, aside from getting the body harness and the relays connected, so your relays will pretty much just pop in, clip down in there, get your body harnesses connected, and get the whole loom kind of set up to where it needs to be, is to get your knock sensors on. Get those on and torqued. On the back side of the engine harness, that's it. So those 2 connectors right there are for the knock sensors. I believe the M52 cars are the same. So get your knock sensors plugged in and then bolt the harness down. So it has a 10mm there. There's a 10mm right down there, that little bolt. So pretty much this metal bracket right here that holds the harness down, get that thing bolted down. There's also a 13 right here on the engine lift bracket. And once you get this tied down, pretty much all of the harness connectors are just going to sort of lay where they need to be. And that's one of the biggest things that I can tell you guys, is to get the harness set up to where it needs to be, so it'll make things going in a lot easier. And it'll also make it a lot easier if you can clip things in that you know where they go. So for instance, get your alternator bolted down. So that has a 13mm and a 10mm on there. Get that guy clipped down. Get your starter wired. The more things that you can get plugged in that you know where they go, the easier it is to get the rest of the connections sort of down into place. And again, with that, the wiring and the wires kind of like to fall where they want to be. So for instance, if you'll notice, this plug kind of wants to bend back, and it's sitting pretty close to this, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that that is for the idle control valve, because it has a 3-prong circuit and it sits very similar to that. Another one is going to be this guy. This is for the oil pressure sensor. If you look in there, that's a single wire sensor, so there's only one wire. Same thing with that. So you have a couple other sensors that are also 2-prong around here, but the coolant temp sensor has 2, as does that little pin for the sensor. So if you can kind of match stuff up like that, you know, this has one, that has one, and it's also right here. So getting it up to the coolant temp sensor is going to be a stretch. So that little connection doesn't want to go that far. So that's probably going to be that guy right there. Same thing with these coolant temp sensors. When they're just hanging out, you know, they have some reach. But aside from that oil pressure sensor, there's really not something that 2 wires can plug into like that. That little wire has a little blue wrap around it, and that sensor is blue, so I'm going to go ahead and say that that's about right. And so here we have another 2-prong connector that's really short. It doesn't have a lot of movement, but the Vano solenoid is also a 2-prong sensor, and that reaches down there just fine. So kind of just using inductive reasoning like that is going to get you a long way with installing one of these harnesses. It might be overwhelming when you first start getting into it, but there's actually not a lot of sensors to these motors. It looks a lot worse than it actually is. And along with that, on the ECU side, we have the main plug that goes to the ECU, and then we have only 2 little power wires that go to this little box here. We have our thing, I don't even have a spot for this because it's a 318 chassis, and then the black guy is going to bolt down to ground right around there. And sort of the same thing with the ignition coils. So you can kind of see where these guys go. So 1, 2, 3, you lay it out, they'll kind of sit where they want to sit. So 4, 5, 6. The injectors are a breeze. The ground just goes right to there. And we have two long guys that come out this way. Now, because they're long, the only sensors over here is the air temp sensor under the intake manifold and the throttle position sensor. So the mass airflow is actually going to come off by the body harness, and that's going to be the main guy here. And I believe this is for an evap purge solenoid, I want to say. So if you can lay the harness out and just sort of go through all of the wiring and figure out where things need to be, you know, just take your time, get it right. Of course, there are also tons of stuff on the internet, on Google, as far as images go, that might not explain it that well, but it'll give you a pretty good educated guess. So down here, we have our cam position sensor and our crank position sensor. Now, the OBD2 cars are different in this because the crank position sensor is actually over there, so I believe the sensor plug-in might be a little bit different if it's not the same. But for you M50 guys, if you'll notice, we have a shorter one. So this part of the harness splits off and is very short, and the one for the crank position is a little bit longer and it's gonna reach a little bit more. So the bottom one is the crank position, the upper one is the cam position. So these harnesses are fun. They can be a little intimidating, but if you take your time and just sort of use inductive reasoning to go through it, you can sort of figure it all out. So hopefully this quick little video helped you guys out when plumbing that main wiring harness. I know the first couple of times you do it, it can be really frustrating, but once you do it over and over and over again, it kind of becomes easier each time. Just get the harness tied down, make sure everything is sitting where it needs to be, and usually everything sort of just falls into place. I'll leave a couple of videos in the description of what I wired bottom ends on the bucket and on this build if you guys haven't checked that out, just to kind of see the flow of how I get it done. On top of that, I'll leave some pictures, like Google images of some good harness, like connection plugins that I found. I don't know. There's a couple good ones on Google, but for the most part, they don't really explain where each connector is in the harness. Just tells you where it connects to, so I don't know if it'll be super helpful to you guys, but best of luck, take your time, and you'll get it right. Thank you guys so much for watching, keep it fresh, and I'll see you guys later.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost. We are reaching for the stars, but we're making